Welcome to the Living Ageless and Bold podcast. Each episode, I bring you amazing women who inspire, educate, and share their experiences and journeys along the way. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's relax and have some fun hearing what can be accomplished after 55. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Living Ageless and Bold. And my guest today is truly living ageless and bold. She has used her life's journey as comedic fuel and created a one-woman comedy show all about it. Merit Kahn is a sales expert. She's an emotional intelligence authority. And for her 50th birthday, she poked fun at her whole life and created a one-woman comedy show called Optimistic Personality Disorder. Welcome, Merit.
Thank you, Christina. It's a pleasure to be here.
I can't wait to hear about that. But obviously you have a career, you spent 20 years doing what you're doing. So let's go back a little bit, talk a little bit about your childhood, because somehow that comedy had to come from somewhere outside of your corporate world.
Yeah. Let's see. I started in sales. I think I was just around people that were just very people. You know, my dad was in advertising. My mom sold real estate. My grandfather had a used car lot. My grandma sold Avon. So it was sort of never a question of what's Merit going to do. It was more.
I was going to say,
what's Merit going to sell?
Merit going to sell? Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I just, I grew up on stages, right? So I, from a very early age, we lived in White Plains, New York, so 30 minutes outside of Manhattan. And we would go to see Broadway shows all the time. And I just grew up just mesmerized with being on stage. And so when we had, elementary school productions and high school productions, and I was always doing something entertaining, whether it was being in the school shows or the choir or cheerleading or ice skating shows. It was just I was always a performer.
Wow. But were you doing performance? So you're working, you're big into sales.
Yeah.
I know you do a lot speaking, emceeing, but did the comedy part come out throughout your career? Like, were you doing it on the side, or was this, hey, I'm 50 and now what?
Yeah. Comedy came a little late in my life. I think, most stand-up comics, you go to the clubs and they're like the 20 somethings, that have a lot of time to go to the late night open mics and things like that. So I started in comedy in 2014 and I took a class, I took a workshop. And at that point I had already been a professional keynote speaker for over a decade. And I wanted to learn how to craft a joke so that my keynote programs could be funnier, right? I was
just going to ask you that if you did that for your keynote.
So a funny thing happened when I did my own original 7-minute comedy set for the purpose of being a better keynoter. It was like, that's all I want to do right now is just make people laugh. It was a whole different energy. Like when I'm doing a keynote or a training program at a sales or leadership conference or something like that, you're paying for the content. It's nice and it helps the medicine go down when I'm funny on stage and relatable and all of those things. But it's the content that is the king in that scenario. Well, in comedy, you are paying to be laughing every 7 to 10 seconds and you're paying for original ideas. And so it was much scarier, but it really helped me look at my life completely differently. Everything that was frustrating for me, I would write in a journal and then I would look at it and go, what's funny about this? And eventually, if you keep asking yourself that question, you will find an answer.
That's really interesting. Did you start with like a lot of the comedians do? Was it your family? Like what was your material when you took your class?
Yeah, my comedy coach really, her brand of comedy was always personal. So it wasn't like Seinfeld, like what's the deal with old people backing out of the driveway? It was like, look at your life and write about what is personal to you and look for those angles. she had a series of questions for us. Her name is Christina Hall, very much alive and well and still doing things in comedy. But she would ask us questions like, what's embarrassing about that? What's unusual about that? And she taught me to really be an observer of myself observing life. And that just changed the game for me. It was just so fascinating. And it was like, why did that register with me just then? Why did I notice that? Like, that's an interesting thing that I said right there. Why did I say that? So it's just observing yourself observing is sort of how it all happened. And in fact, that's how I came up with the name of my one-woman show, Optimistic Personality Disorder. It was because I wrote in my journal. At that time, my marriage was falling apart. It was very difficult. And I was writing, and I actually wrote the sentence something like, no, but I'm pretty sure this divorce will be smooth. And all of a sudden I looked at it and I go, why in the world would I think when we were in love and it was challenging that we are no longer in love, but the divorce is going to go smooth? Like, I think I'm the one with the problem. And it just hit me. It was like, okay, I think that's a little bit too much optimism. And that's when I didn't even think it consciously. It was like optimistic personality disorder just showed up on the page. And I'm like, that actually defines my entire life.
Isn't that fun? Well, but there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. Like we were just on vacation and I was struggling with something, and my daughter's friend, we go with another family, and she's like, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. Like, you are Miss Positive. You are Miss Sunshine with everything. How can you possibly think that this is not going to work out too? And I was like, oh, Sarah, is that really like what you think of me? So I think I have optimistic personality disorder as well.
It's an epidemic.
Yes, you are not alone. Do you remember your first joke? Did it hit?
My first joke was my husband is in the audience, and my husband is great, and he thinks so too. And it hit, and he was in the audience at that time. And then my joke started getting a little bit meaner as my marriage started getting a little bit worse. And it got to the point where my coach said, yeah, you're not allowed to do that joke on stage. You've crossed the line. Like, that'll make your audience uncomfortable. And so that was a good lesson too. Like in comedy, you want to find that edge. And use comedy to work through difficult things, I think is a great tool. But at the end of the day, you're performing, you got to protect your audience too, and care for them, and you don't want to make them necessarily uncomfortable. At least that's not my style of comedy.
Right.
So
at what point did you realize that comedy was more than just helping you with your keynotes? Like, oh, I think there's something else for me here.
It would have been on my 50th birthday. Before I had a friend who said to me, she wrote a list of 50 things she wanted to do before her 50th birthday. And there were all these, experiences. It was like she wanted to go axe throwing and skydiving and stuff like that. And I had done a lot of things already. So I started my list, and the first thing I wanted was to go back to Southeast Asia, where I had backpacked around the world when I was 25 years old, and I wanted to go back to some of those places with money this time, not as a backpacker. And the second thing that I wrote on the list was I want to do a one-woman show, which was a weird thing to write on your list when you've never ever had that thought in your head. Like, it never ever occurred to me. And I looked at it and I go, that's weird. Where'd that come from? And as I sat down to write the rest of the list, there was nothing else on the list. It was like, oh no, I guess that's the thing. Like, that's the thing I want. And
that's
so
going to be the next 48.
Yeah. So I really just, I thought about the people in my life, the lessons I learned, the things that made me laugh, the embarrassing moments, the trauma, the pivotal moments. And I just started writing. And fortunately, I had already had some stand up about many of those different parts of life. And so I kind of started to think, like, how could I string those together in a story that brings somebody along for the ride? But more importantly, who am I, right? Like, it was like, my story's not that uncommon, right? But if you can see yourself in my story, if you can leave the theater feeling inspired about your own life, or inspired to find moments of humor to rewrite your past, which I believe rewires your future, then my show is not just an entertaining 70 minutes or 63. It's the spark. And what I found when I performed over the past few years is that, you know, I love the opportunities to make a difference in my keynote programs. And there's nothing better than somebody coming up after your program to say, like, oh my God, that really made a difference. I really resonated. But I started hearing that more from my theater show than my keynotes. Not to diss my keynotes, still a good keynoter, but it was weird. Like, that wasn't my expectation. And that's when I kind of thought, like, oh, maybe I am writing the next chapter of my life story with the help of the audiences that are watching the show of the first 50 years. So it's kind of interesting.
When you say a one-woman show, I think of, props and sets and acting. But what's the difference between that and a comedy routine, a 63-minute comedy routine?
Great question. So when I do stand-up, it's literally mic stand, glass of water on a bar stool on stage. There's nothing, right? There's one spotlight.
Quintessential comedian.
Yes. Yeah. And when you come to see, I perform, I tour the country with a group called Moms Unhinged. We're all mom comedians and all mom audiences, and we sell out theaters across the country, and it's magical fun. But if you saw me in that venue, you would see some of the jokes that I do in my stand-up, in my one-woman show, but you would see them in a stand-up format. And that has a particular experience. And, and there's more than me on that lineup. You have like 3 or 4 different comedians. My theater show, my one-woman show, is exactly what you described. It's a set, it's props and costume changes, and it's all me for that entire time telling you a story. So it goes through these levels like you would expect in any good story. There's moments that are funny. There's moments where you might get a little tear in your eye, if I do say so myself. There's relatable moments. There's moments you'll go, oh yeah, I did something like that. And so it's much more personal. It's much more intimate. I reveal so much more in my theater show than in my stand-up set. And at the end of the show, there's what is called in theater a talk back. So instead of the actor leaving the stage and you applaud and you never see her again, I come back and I turn up the house lights and I say, okay, let's talk about your life. Let's talk about, what questions do you have? And I get the craziest questions. They're interested sometimes in a certain piece of the story and they want, like, well, what happened after that? Or, do you still talk to that person? So it's really fascinating to hear what people ask about. And then when it's appropriate, I invite them to participate in what I call a work show experience. So because of my training background, I really wanted to help other people going through big transitions in their life to find that through line and to find the humor. And so I do workshops, but I wrap it around the show. So you're not just seeing the show and you're not just going to workshop. It's literally a work show experience. It's like this beautiful 24 hours where I take you behind the scenes to just kind of figure out how would you do the story of your life. And I give you that structure, and then you see it unfold in the theater, and then you come back the next day for, okay, well, let's make this funny. And it's a really neat experience.
So how in the world did you come up with this? I mean, I know a lot of people who've done the comedy training and just because they just wanted to try it, it was like this hidden desire they had. But how did you know how to write a show, how to do the sets and the props and that to me is just, I'm like, my mind is blown hearing you talk about this. I get the comedy, standing up with your cup of water and a bar stool, but to actually that's not your background. You're
No.
not a playwright. You're not, you haven't been in the theater. How in the world did you know what to do?
Well, for the first 6 months, I did nothing. It was like I made this decision, and then I was like, I don't know what to do, so I didn't do anything. And then I just started asking a lot of questions. I, just
to whom? Like who
I
did you
went
find to
online.
help?
I went
Okay.
online and I found I probably started with like one woman show. Like, thanks Google, like help me, Obi-Wan. And
Yeah.
and then I would literally just call people doing shows and be like, I don't know how to do this, but I have this dream. And I am fortunate in my circle of professional speakers, I happen to know 3 women who did do a one woman show. So that was fortunate for me. And I talked with them and how did they develop and how did they do all of that? I had a wonderful, have a wonderful woman who coaches me in my keynotes. And she also was a stand-up comic for many years, professional. And Karen Ruth White, she's just a genius with words. And so I approached her with this project and I said, hey, can you help me with this? And so she helped me as my associate co-writer on the show. And she was, I think it's magical when you have somebody that, has a similar style and we just were fanatical about like writing and, so that was helpful, but I don't know what I'm doing. And, part of
Sometimes
that
that's
good.
better.
Yes. So exactly.
From all the women that I have interviewed and a lot of like very successful women who've sold companies for hundreds of millions of dollars. And a lot of it was they had no idea what they were doing.
Yeah.
They just fumbled their way through. And, if they were 50 trying to do that business that they launched in their 20s, they never would have done it because they would have overthought it.
Oh, yeah.
But
I'm still overthinking. Still overthinking it.
So does your one woman show evolve as you evolve? Or is it a set like this is optimistic personality disorder? This is the show.
Well, so it is evolving. It's actually, what's funny about it is, the show really is, my first 50 years, which technically ended December of 2019. Okay. So when I did the original show in November of 2019, which I thought was going to be one night only performance, I didn't write this show to be a business. I wrote this is what I want to do for my friends for my birthday. You got to buy a ticket to celebrate my birthday with me, but but
I will entertain you.
Yes,
I think,
exactly.
I hope.
Yeah, it was great. And I really just never thought anything else would come of it. Well, after that, there was just like a lot of changes still in life. And, that was already 6 years
pandemic.
Ago. Yeah.
So I imagine there has to be a part of your show that involves that now.
Oh, yeah.
How could it not? That was
crazy.
I
when I did the show in 2022, I changed the ending and it was a little risque because I had some risque experiences between 2019 and 2022, but I changed the ending and then I realized that might have been a little too shocking. So we'll just pull it back a little bit. But I think where I'm landing right now, it's still a 1-act performance. The second act is where I have in my mind, here's what happened since. So I went back to the original ending. So really the timeline of the show is 1969 to 2019. And then there is a 20-minute set that comes next, which is all about, let me tell you the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would have said. So it's let me just kind of pull you along. Like since then, there's all this other funny stuff. And so I think that, is a natural way to just keep the story evolving, so that I can continue to add to it, which I think is a lot of fun for me to just keep it fresh.
Yeah. So walk us through a little bit. I mean, don't give the whole show away, but you said it starts in 1969. So was that like when you were born?
Yep.
And then, so, you know, is it like then your teenage years and your, just walk us through how the show goes.
Yeah, it's actually organized around the decade. So actually I kind of, I start with present day. And when the show starts, you see that the set is there, but I'm standing at a microphone and I'm delivering, like the show starts with a stand-up set. So it's kind of like it's this beautiful circular construction where we start with present day and then we kind of look back, because the setup of the whole experience is, you know, what if you could rewrite your life story? You know, how would you rewrite it? Like if you could control the narrative. And so that just kind of sets the structure. And I say, well, let's give it a shot. And then I go back to, you know, decade 1, which I call the adorable years. And you know, there's some characters I introduce you to in decade 1 that will, you know, you'll hear the influence that they had later in my life, and you'll hear a couple of experiences, and it's very funny. And then I introduce decade 2, which is, you know, the teenage years. And then we go into, you know, the 20s and the 30s and so it really takes you through the decades. And I have some very fun props that give you that, like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember the 80s. Like, okay, I changed my hair, I changed my outfits, but I do it all on stage. So I'm never leaving you. It's just, it's a very seamless experience, but you see me growing up before you, and you hear the different stories and how something that I learned in the 6th grade showed up for me in my 30s, 40s, and 50s. So, the best way to describe the show is if a TED Talk and a tequila shot had a baby, it would be this show.
It sounds fabulous.
Thanks.
You said you like Broadway. I don't know if you've seen & Juliet, but it was fantastic. And it's Shakespeare's wife rewriting his stories.
I love it.
Yeah, and it's so funny and it's so good. So I just envision that. But you have to get on a deeper, you know, once you change something, like you said, you talk about something in your 30s and your 40s that you could relate back to 6th grade. Well, then that might not have happened.
Yeah.
You don't have this experience. You might not have that experience.
I totally agree with that. And so I'm not rewriting from the standpoint of like, well, let's just erase it. I'm not erasing anything, but I am giving myself a little bit more agency to choose my perspective and to really rewrite the narrative. So instead of, oh, woe's me, I married a narcissist, it's, oh my God, that was hilarious. You know, like, okay, like it's hilarious that I did that.
Let me tell you this story.
Yeah. And so once I, and that's a great example, you know, he was very frustrating. Anybody who's been in a relationship with a narcissist, they're all over the place and they're very frustrating individuals. But once you understand them, there's a formula to it. And so it can become humorous, but you have to be very deliberate how you interact and how you choose your responses. And so in that, there is some funny. But yeah, there's a lot of funny moments being a mom. There were funny moments. You know, I dated an A-list actor. I'm not going to give it away. You have to come see the show if you want to know who it is. So
just,
you know,
tell me if it's Brad Pitt.
No, it wasn't Brad Pitt. It was someone funny.
Okay.
Someone funny.
So where do you do your show? You say you go across the country. I mean, you're still working, you're still speaking. So
yeah, the speaking business is great because it's so flexible. And a lot of times when I am booked for a speaking event, you know, that'll be like 3 or 6 months out usually. And so then I look since I'm already going to be there, I kind of look and see, is there a theater that I can go to perform my show as long as I'm out there? So that's a lot of how I build my tour, is just kind of, you know, where I happen to be. I am performing. I perform regularly in the Denver, Colorado area because that's where I'm from. I am doing a show in Rapid City, South Dakota, October 9th, 2025. If you're listening and you're in that area, I'm doing a couple shows in Nebraska in November. And I'm currently building I'm building out the tour for the first quarter of 2026. So it's an interesting thing. Sometimes I'm just doing a straight theater rental. I just find a theater that is in a good location where I think my audience would be. So I'm kind of more of a suburban girl. And sometimes it's just that simple. And other times it's theaters that have subscriber base and they are looking for unique experiences for their subscribers. And so they'll pay me an artist fee to perform the show, and they'll use it as a revenue generator because they know that their audience would really appreciate this type of a performance. And so those are great deals for me because, I'm doing something good for their theater. I'm getting more exposure and getting to perform for an audience. And I, make a little bit of money. It's not Keynote money, but it's fun. And I get to, perform and share my show. And so if you're listening and you have a theater, that's a fun thing to do too.
Yeah. I know, because so many people want me to host a live event, and I have imposter syndrome. I mean, I'm like, how am I going to fill a room in my area? I grew up here. I know thousands of people. Like, I know this is not going to be difficult, but so how do you go to a city you've never been to? And it's one thing when you do your 50th birthday and you ask all your friends to buy a ticket. Of course they're going to do that. But I'd love to learn from you on that. Like, how do you?
Well,
how do you have the confidence for that?
Scary. So I happen to be very lucky. The Moms Unhinged comedy troupe that I perform with has a great brand and a great following. And when I'm renting a theater, I tend to go back to the places where Moms Unhinged sold really well. Smart. And that's my Very same smart. Audience. So I'm stacking the deck as best I can in my area in my favor. But I'm also, in the spirit of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm probably doing a lot different things than you would traditionally do to market your business. So for example, a regular theater show is just, they're going to buy ads. They're going to do the typical things and be on the typical sites that you would experience. I spend my late nights. This is my fun thing. I go on Facebook and like for the upcoming show in Rapid City, and I look for like women's groups in Rapid City. And then I literally message them. Hey, I'm coming to town. I'm sure you have no idea who I am. But it looks like you have a lot of women in your group. And if you're open to it, I'd love to, do some sort of ticket deal with you or, offer you some complimentary tickets to help promote to your group. I think it's a great, fun girls' night out. And I get responses back and they're like, that sounds awesome. So I'm very much a grassroots. Like I literally think about every single ticket in the theater. Now I also buy Facebook ads and, and do the things, but I'm doing press releases. I used to work in the radio business. So I know what they're looking for. I know, I've trained a lot of TV stations. I go to LinkedIn. I literally put in like, who do I know in Rapid City? And I happen to know the GM of one of the TV stations out there. So I sent him a message. Hey, can you give this press release to your news team? So there's lots of grassroots things that are happening. And I think, that's important. You gotta do that stuff.
Oh, I love it. It's brilliant. Thanks. It really is. How fun. Okay. Do you have a favorite decade like in your show? Is there one that makes you laugh the most and one that makes you cry the most?
I would say decade 2 and 5 are definitely the funniest.
Which is our lives, our 20s and our 50s.
Yeah,
I totally get that.
Yeah,
totally.
I would say decade 4 has the most like, oh my gosh, kind of moment. Like, oh, I didn't see that coming.
Was that divorce decade?
It was divorce decade, but that's not the one you wouldn't see coming. So there's some health stuff in there.
Okay.
So, it's just a nice roller coaster. Yeah. I think again, it mirrors all of our lives. But I'm always kind of tinkering with the script a little bit. So I think decade three is kind of the shortest. It's not as fun, still funny, but it's sort of like, I think I can do better with decade 3. So I'm always tinkering with it, just to see how much better I can make it.
Was that young kids decade?
Yes. So I got married at 30 and, so that was, young kid decade.
I could plot this out for you because I'm 58. I get it because I got married at 28 and had kids at 30 and 32. And that's a blur. That's the hardest time. You know, you're raising kids, you're working, you've got a husband, you're just like, I don't know if I could do this. And it's just poof.
Yeah. That was the roller coaster years. So each decade has a theme.
Okay.
The adorable years is decade 1. The performer years is decade 2. The roller coaster years is 3. The adventure year. Oh, sorry. Decade 3 is the adventure years. I got to know my own script. Decade 4 was the roller coaster years, and decade 5 is the freedom years. So, and
decade 6.
And decade 6 is being written as we speak because now I'm 55. So I got a lot more material, and that goes into that straight stand-up set. We do the talk back. So it's really a full evening of theater. It's really, some theaters like a 1-act experience, and other theaters want a 2-act show. So in the second act is here's what's happened since stand-up set, and then everybody gets the talk back because that's just fun for me too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, because I'm really curious about this, tell us a little bit more about these workshops that you do.
The work show experience is fabulous. So if you imagine, like I've been doing workshops and training sessions for 2 decades. I have a lot of content, but I had particular exercises and experiences that I designed as I was writing the show to help me craft my life. So one I call the lifeline exercise. And that's literally where, if you can imagine, you draw a center line across a page and you plot the points of your life, the highs above the line and the lows below the line. And what happens in that beautiful exercise is very quickly you see you have bounced back after bad things. Like we've all had ups and downs, and I have you plot the points so that the highs are really high. It's just sort of it looks like where you experienced it on a timeline. And then when you step back, you just have a whole different experience of your life. And so it's a very eye-opening exercise. The other thing that we talk about is the beliefs that we create at different phases of our life. And I call them hand-me-down beliefs. So sometimes you have a belief about something and you don't realize that it's driving all the possibilities in your future, but it's underlying everything. And so the question is, if you could, I have people kind of just write down some of the beliefs you have, right? Some of the things that support you or sabotage you. And then when you look at the list and you think, now, is this the belief that I would write as an adult with the perspective that I have, knowing what I want in my future? Does this belief serve me in that? And if it doesn't, then I invite you to rewrite it, because you might have been handed this like a hand-me-down sweater, and now you get to look at it and go, you know what? This one just doesn't fit. And so the question is like, why is that belief that you've held so tightly the truth any more than the new one you would rewrite as an adult with your current perspective? And so I've seen a lot of like mind boggling, like, what? I never thought about it. And it's just amazing what you can create when you let go of some of the things that hold you back without your say so.
Sounds amazing. Amazing. And I'm sure all that information is on your website.
It is. If you want to know about the show, you want to see a little video, a little teaser, you want to get the tour dates or buy tickets, it's all on opdshow.com. Or you can type out optimisticpersonalitydisorder.com. that's just a really long way to get there. But it's a great place to connect with me there. There's always a Let's Talk button on the top right. And if you have a theater or you want to sponsor the show in some way, I'm always intrigued and happy to have creative conversations about how can I help you with this. And I've been approached by some nonprofits where the themes make some sense. And so they use my show as a fundraiser. There's lots of creative ways, and I'm just, I'm a creative thinker. So I like that kind of stuff.
No, that's awesome. And I'll put all the information in the show notes. So everyone watching and listening, share this with your friends. The show sounds amazing. And it sounds like we just have to check out the website, see if we can find one close to us. So Merit, thank you so much for joining me today.
You are welcome. Thanks for having me, Christina.
Thank you for listening or for watching this episode of Living Ageless and Bold. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit subscribe. And if you like the episode, I hope that you will give us a great review. You can also head over to livingagelessandbold.com and sign up for information, inspiration, and exclusive opportunities for us, women over 55. Thanks for listening. And remember, no matter what you do, keep living ageless and bold.